Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I am thrilled to have you here on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And today, I actually want to express tremendous amount of gratitude. This week, we hit 3-year anniversary for the show, which firstly, I want to thank my producer, CC Schatz, for making it so successful, but also for convincing me to do it when I was quite reluctant in the beginning, I must be honest. So thank you for that. I also want to thank all of my guests who have made it so successful, as well as all of you listening over the years. I can truly tell you that I appreciate it very, very much. And our show is about creating financial wellness. We're going to look at different life cycles and explore them, both financially and emotionally, because emotions are really what it's all about when it comes to our money and not the money. It also is important to be emotionally healthy because we tend to make better decisions. So if you want to learn more about your situation, please reach out to me. You can reach me through lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, my website, or you can post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or any of the other platforms you may be listening. We have all heard things like, that person's out of their mind, or the only thing holding us back is ourselves, right? A frightening statistic I heard, I'm guessing probably 15 years ago, that's always stuck with me, is that the average person thinks in a negative format about 60% of the time. We encouraged to think outside of the box, but we judged for being outside of our minds. So where am I going with all these random thoughts or seemingly disconnected ideas? Today, we're going to explore how being out of your mind may actually be a good thing. And what I mean by that is how changing the way we think can be enormously beneficial to help us understand the mindset and shifting your mindset and how exactly that can help you design your new life narrative is a wonderful guide. Lisa Lisser joins us today. Lisa is an attorney. She is very engaged in nonprofit work. She's a public speaker and advocate, has served on various boards, is certified in spiritual counseling, which, by the way, I think everybody needs more of, not what you hear from most CPA, CDFA type people, but I think all of us need more of that. Lisa is a certified divorce coach. She's a transition coach supporting clients through the turbulent waters and navigating through divorce and more. And try putting all of that on a business card. Not easy. Her combination of being the attorney, the nonprofit leader, a coach, life experiences, I think is going to help us tremendously in understanding how evaluating how we think and how a mindset pivot can be so crucial to our well-being. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Hirsch. This is really a blend, the mindset pivot and the financial wherewithal. They go together because you're in a hurricane of emotions when
Yes.
you need to try and figure out how to have a clear mind to deal with your financial future.
Right.
And how do you do that, especially when you have no support? So that's where the divorce coach who helps you turn down the temperature and the heat and take the swirl and minimize it. That's what
I'm going to add to that a little bit, that I'm not even sure people realize what or how they're thinking and that they need that mindset shift as well. So clearly there's a passion. We've spoken a few times already, and there's a passion that comes from you, from your journey, from your work. I'm going to ask that you share a little bit about your story and where your strength comes from and why you do what you do.
So sure. You gave all my credentials, which I really appreciate. And credentials are one thing, but life experience is really what defines us, right? I came from a solid family background. My parents are still married, and that was the story I grew up with, right? There's no solid life except the life we know, right? The story we tell in our minds is the story we grow up with, and And that's what we reflect on. But the story I wrote for myself was not the story that actually happened to me. So I am the divorced mother of 3, and I've been divorced now for 8 years. And the divorce started 3 years before that. And of course, the trouble started before that. And like many people, I fought the trouble because that wasn't the story I told myself. That wasn't how it was supposed to be. And I didn't want that to be true. And so I struggled and I wanted to make it work. And I wished that I could have made it work. And I did everything I could to make it work. And I wanted my life to be different. In the course of that, I raised my kids, and we had wonderful times, but we also had challenging times. And so I had to make something different. I had to make hard choices. And so my background led me to make a hard choice and realize that I had to change my story. I had to make a real decision that changed my story. And I didn't know what that would turn out to. But I was supposed to be a strong woman. I was a lawyer once. I had retired from law to raise my kids. And so I needed to be strong, even though I felt weak. And the strong, weak story was going on in my head. And I needed to make decisions that I didn't feel prepared for. And I, at the same time, I continued my work in nonprofit, and I did leadership, and I got a master's in Jewish education, and I became a spiritual counselor. And I realized that I could help people on the spiritual side. And maybe that could have been something that would have helped me when I was going through divorce. And how would that have worked? And I had these like reframes of what my story might have been and what other people's stories could have been. But I didn't quite know how to fit that into a model, right? I didn't know quite how to fit the spiritual counseling into a professional frame. So I continued on, and I became a Jewish educator. I wrote curriculum. I leaned in to a new story, right? A new definition of who I was. And in the process of becoming a more professional self, I discovered there was a thing called divorce coaching. And now I realized there was a role I could fit, this spirituality, the professionalism of the law, knowing a little bit about the law, the experience of having divorce, and then the technique of coaching that I could blend with the technique of spiritual counseling to really work together all of these different skills to help people walk the path. So
the first thing I want to tell everyone listening is, if you're feeling hopeless, which people often do in a marriage, even not even in a divorce, they feel like this is the end, this is my life, it's hopeless. It's not. There are options. Yeah. I will put that up. But I'm going to ask you the classic question I know you get asked a lot is, so what is a divorce coach? Is that a therapist? Like, tell me more, you know?
You know, like, and I ask the same question, like, what is a divorce coach? Like, why would I? So a divorce coach is a person who, so I'm going to start with the negative, right? A divorce coach is not a lawyer, is not a therapist, is not a financial analyst, none of those things.
Right.
But a divorce coach fills the space that all of those professionals don't fill. So in other words, a divorce coach is the shoulder to lean on when you have the emotional turbulence that you need to release.
Right.
You don't need to release it to your lawyer and spend $500 an hour releasing it. You can release it to your divorce coach. And your divorce coach's job is helping you clear the way, you know, like with the machete, through the baggage, the forest of your emotional journey, so that you can find the clarity to ask your lawyer the questions you need to ask. And your divorce coach is the person who can take the emotions that you're wading through the issues with your therapist, but your therapist doesn't have the tools to get you to the strategy of your divorce. So your therapist can work you through your issues, your mental health issues, the baggage that may have gotten you into this situation. And we all have baggage. So I'm not accusing anyone of or calling anyone out for having baggage, but we're born and then we have baggage. That's sort of the story of all of our lives. But the therapist expertise is not in how do you then relate to the actual legal process. So my role as a divorce coach is to help you in that space in between. So someone has used a metaphor where you are walking into a room and you have a suitcase, right? The therapist opens up the suitcase and takes everything out and unfolds it and looks at it and examines it and refolds it and repacks it. And that's the work of the therapist. You walk into a coach's room and you have a suitcase and the coach says to you, I see you have a suitcase. You're going somewhere. How do you want to get there? So it's like it's a different model, right?
Yeah.
And that's the role of the divorce coach. And then for the financial scheme, the divorce coach can help you when you get that document that you have to write out your budget and you're like overwhelmed, because most people sweat when they get that case information statement, which is the language that we have in New Jersey for what you have to fill out. And so the divorce coach can sit with you and answer questions like, where am I going to find this information? And the divorce coach can help you answer that question.
Right.
And help you fill it out. Now, I can't make the judgments on what's the best way for you to live your financial future, but I can help you find the questions you need to ask your financial analyst.
Right. And I want to point something out that I think you said, and I want to repeat, I think is so important. Use the right professional for the right reasons. I think, when people say the fees are so much, this, that, often that's the case. They're not using the right professional for the right reason. And you get a better result and you emotionally much better by doing that. And I want to touch briefly on, because I really want to focus more on the shifting of your mindset, right? But very briefly, why do people get stuck in the way they think? Is it kind of this classic history repeating itself scenario, but on a personal level, or is there something else to it, do you think?
Well, we all live in our stories. Right? We all have stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Like, we are supposed to be a straight A student, or we are not the person who has a certain kind of problem, or we are always right. Like, we all put labels on ourselves. Right. And we live in a society that's very binary, right? It's either or. It's black or white. And yet the world is very gray.
Right.
And so it's hard for us to be wrong. So if my life is X or Y, then my story is X or Y. So I don't know how to live outside of that story. But when life happens and all of a sudden my story has changed and not of my own choosing,
right,
then I need to adapt, and I don't know how to adapt. So let me give an example. So I get married and I have beautiful children and they're going to be perfect. And then one of my children has a chronic illness, right? In my case, my oldest child had type 1 diabetes.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the story changed. Right? This happens to all of us.
Yeah.
Now, the story we've been telling ourselves about ourselves is different. And how we adapt to that is different, right? In every life. And also in many relationships, the spouses don't adapt to it the same way. And we are fighting for our spouse to adapt to it our way. And our spouse is fighting against adapting to it our way and wants us to adapt to it their way. And that's where the stories knock against each other.
And I'm going to add to that, I think, the classic Maslow of needing your base needs versus becoming the, eureka moment or the aha person that, self-fulfilled. Add to that, I guess, emotions, not being at your best, self-doubt, where's this going, not understanding what the future looks like, and we're going to make it financially. I'm guessing that all the logistics of recreating your life is not a task you may always be up for every day with that, So what is a mindset shift, and how do you help people to move in that direction and move there?
So mindset shift is really huge, because we when we get stuck, we are stuck in our ways. And so, like, if I have been communicating with my spouse in a certain way and I get a certain result every time, but I continue to communicate with my spouse in that way because that's what I know, right? That's the only way I know how to do it.
Right.
A mindset shift could be working with me to help you see that this pattern isn't working for you. And what if we shifted the pattern? So for instance, yesterday I was on a call with a client, and she had an issue, and she told me how she was going to approach her spouse with this particular issue. And then I said, so how has that been working for you? And she said, well, we always fight when we have this conversation. And then she said, and I didn't even have to ask the question, he really likes when he likes no excess conversation, no excess words. He just wants me to get straight to the point. And so I said, what does that look like? And she said, well, that would be me saying da 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 da. And I said to her, so can you say that to him? And she said, yes, I guess I could. And then you know what she said to me? She said, thank you.
Wow.
And meanwhile, she's the one who created it herself.
Right.
But I just gave her the opening to say what she already knew.
Right.
So that's a mindset shift. Because we're so stuck on the way we do things. You need someone to give you permission. And that's what it does.
And I think there's a gap sometimes that needs to be bridged. Like if she had crossed the bridge over to his side and said, well, how does he need to receive it? But hadn't really thought about it that way, right? And by the way, that is a classic Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, whatever that book is, right? Men and women tend to speak differently. Men in general want to hear it and then give me the details. Women want to hear the details and then give me the bottom line. And so thinking about who your audience is, and that's a generalization, I get it, but having the audience, who am I catering to in that, I think becomes such an important piece, which, you help to walk that bridge and close the gap kind of thing. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And something that hopefully she'll do next time, maybe not have to ask for the help in getting there next time, or at least get part of the way and, make that progress is wonderful. So is this something your clients recognize is or has happened? Is there this eureka moment I've arrived, or how does that work?
Well, so it's a practice, right? This is a practice. So you need to get the reps in, right? So it's like the first time they hear it, they want to do it. And it may happen in the moment and it may not. You know what I mean? You want to do it, but you might not get it right the first time. And so in the coaching space, we practice, and sometimes we do role play. Right. And sometimes because you have to rehearse, right? It's like a show, right? You've got to rehearse to make sure you get it right. And the more you're engaged in that, the more it comes naturally. And so
I guess you can also play different ways of, because sometimes when you hear yourself saying something, it's very different to thinking it in your mind and how it comes out.
Yes.
And being able to play out and go, I don't know that that's going to be the way, and try something else, I think becomes a valuable
Well,
thing
that's
that,
also, yeah, that's also part of what we do in the coaching space. So
yeah,
we walk down the path. So we take multiple roads. So we first, as in that example, we walk down the path of how she usually approaches a problem. Then she said, well, this is the way he normally would want it, even though I don't usually do it that way. And
right,
there was the aha moment. And then we could walk down a path. Well, what would be a way that might blend those two things where you would get what you need and he would get what he needs? And we would go down a path that she might never have thought of before. And that often is a really eye-opening, because part of the exercise of coaching is that it's exercise, right? And you're
right,
in a risk-free zone because the other person isn't there. So and the coach is a non-judgmental space, and
right,
I don't have a stake in it. So for instance, all of the friends, all of your relatives, all of the people in your world who you share what's going on in your life, all have a stake in the process. If they are in team wife, they're
right,
gonna say one thing and have a stake in it. If they're in team husband, they're gonna have a stake in it. And if they love both of you, they are being pulled in both directions, and you are questioning everybody's loyalty, and there's so much emotion wrapped in there.
right.
The coach just wants to make sure you get through intact and in better shape than when you came into my Zoom space in the
Right.
first time.
I like that. I think that's a perfect place to get a break. So before we do, though, how can people get in touch with you to learn more about what you do or to speak to you about maybe working with you?
Sure, that's great. So you can reach me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com, email me directly, or you can find me at www.lzlcoaching.com. On my website, you can schedule a free 30-minute discovery session. I have a calendar and scheduling space right there online. So that's how you can find me.
All right. And we'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact goingsolodirectory.com.
Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I'm here with Lisa Lisser from LZL Coaching to do a divorce better. And we are talking about a mindset shift and redesigning your life narrative. I do want to recap, as I always do, some of the things we've spoken about. Firstly, thank you for sharing your story. It's not always easy to share the personal details of your life to the Ethernet, and whoever is listening, we don't always know. So thank you for that. We spoke a little bit about a divorce coach and what a divorce coach is and a therapist, and I really appreciate it. I've never heard in all the years I've been doing this, I've never heard the suitcase story or analogy, which I really, really liked. I thought it brought it home. We spoke a little bit about why do people get stuck in their ways, about Maslow, the uncertainty, the emotions, what emotions do. About a little bit we touched on, we're going to get more into this, about what is a mindset shift, how does it help, how do you do it, how did you frame it? You gave one example. I was thinking also when I was going through my divorce, I remember somebody saying to me something to the effect of, you got to get out of your head. It's like being in a war zone and you're behind enemy lines. And I was like, wow, that's harsh. And then I was like, no, that's accurate. So it can sometimes, especially when, people beat themselves up sometimes, or I could have done better, or they feel a feeling of failure, which I have a big issue with. That's a whole side point. It's easy to get in your head, and it's easy for it not to be a pleasant place. And having this mindset shift, being able to look at things and create a new reality, which it's a different reality, and it's real. It's not a fantasy world. Sometimes what you have in your head is really the fantasy world, and being able to get out of that, I think, is so important. I am going to ask just a little bit, can you share maybe a little bit more about your experience, another story or two maybe on how people have changed done this mindset shift, and they maybe came to you, they were stuck in a certain way of thinking or with the thought of a certain outcome, and how maybe you were able to help them kind of get the right perspective of things and be able to do that shift?
So a lot of people come into the divorce coaching space, and they come in with a real victim mindset. Like they don't believe they can get out of their own way.
Right.
They have caused all of the trouble in their relationship. They should have done things differently. They're very much in the should zone. Like, I should have done this. I should have done that. What's
Right.
wrong with me? Who will ever want me? I mean, there's a lot of that goes on because you feel like you've made so many mistakes. You failed in the story of your life, as you said. And so what I try to convey to these clients is that having diagnoses has a positive, but it also has a really negative impact.
Right.
Because with a diagnosis, you get stuck in a story like, oh, that's just who I am. I am the person with the victim complex. But you don't have to be that person. That story doesn't have to be your story. You are a person who can be a very strong, brilliant person who raised 3 strong, brilliant children, or whatever definition, we all have children, we all define them whatever way we define them. And, my kids could be strong and brilliant and still be pains in the neck and not always cooperative and never take the dog out, right? It's
Right.
both and. I don't live in a binary either or, but everything is both and in the world that I live with spiritual counseling and with divorce coaching. And so what I try to do in the coaching space is help my clients see that their story is both and. So yes, there may have been moments where you felt like the victim, and you are not the victim today. So today you can make a different choice. Right? Today, your story is you are making a different choice and encapsulating it, like taking your future and saying, I am making the choice to stand for myself. And even if you say to yourself, but I've never done that, I don't know how to do that, then we say, okay, let's make a plan.
Right. Well, I've never been let.
Right.
I've never been able to because I was never given the ability to. There's so many things. I'm sorry, I just got to jump in that I think are so important here that you're saying is just because your spouse says it doesn't make it true. I've heard so often, like you said, who would want me? Very often that comes from the spouse. Yeah. Oh, if I divorce you or if we get divorced, who would ever want you? You've got 3 kids or whatever that is, right?
Yes.
Just because they say it doesn't make it true. Also, as you said, with a diagnosis, that a diagnosis in some ways is a label, and labels are how we live our life, right? In many ways. And I just got to tell you, I went to a winery once, and one of the most amazing things that I liked about it, I liked the wine, I will be honest, but on the bottle, it says, we label wine, not people.
Yes, I love it.
And I love that. And especially if you know the history of the winery, it's because they've got a couple hundred special needs people who work there, and that's part of why they put it on. But the message, once you label something, that's what it is in somebody's mind, especially if that's how you've grown up all your life. So
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so powerful, and I think that's so important for people to understand.
And
So,
I
go ahead.
I have a client who says that, her therapist tells her that she behaves in a way a person who lived with a big trauma behaved. And she has gone through her life and she can't identify anything that was a big trauma. So what's wrong with her that she's, so now she's like digging in, well, how come I'm acting like a person in trauma and I didn't have trauma, and what's wrong with me, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, stop, take a break, take a deep breath. You don't have to fill all of these different boxes just because your therapist said.
Right.
All right. And so take a breath and start your new life today. Okay. Redesign your life.
Right.
You're allowed to do that now. In fact, you have the opportunity to do that now. And you don't have to live in the definitions that you lived in before. And that gives her the opening if she chooses to take it. Right?
Yeah, I know I've said this quite a few times on the show, but the very first blog I ever wrote, I called it Divorce is Awesome, right? It was back in probably early 15, and everyone said, oh, you got to change the name, which I did. And I changed it to Perspective is Everything. And the idea was that my life had died this horrible, excruciating death through my divorce, but it really became an opportunity. And I think the question, or what I'm hearing a little bit, is, are you going to live in that excruciating death of your life, or are you going to look at the opportunity of what maybe this presents? And that's a little bit of redesigning your narrative in your life, right? And as you said earlier, many of these pieces to redesigning your life is a choice. Do I want to be the victim? Do I want to live my life in this way, or do I want to look at all the amazing things that are in my life? And yes, there may have been trauma, but it doesn't have to define me. Or there's so many ways that this can come through, right? So I think these are all very, very important things. And I'm going to ask, you have a unique background in many ways. Like, not everybody doing what you're doing is a spiritual counselor. Not everyone's an attorney. Not everyone has had leadership roles. Not everyone has been through a divorce. You got all of that. So can you share a little bit about I'm imagining that you have a little bit of a more unique way of coaching that enables people to move forward and create this positive mindset.
So yes, and I haven't been in that many other people's divorce rooms. So I mean, coaching rooms, right?
Right.
So I don't necessarily know how other people do it. I just know what I offer. Right. So and this is my spiritual counseling training, is I look at the person in my space, soul to soul. And I see them as someone I can relate to, someone who I have sat in their space. I recognize the pain, and I have lived the power of possibility. And I know it's not easy.
Right.
I don't tell them they can do things that are easy. I live in, and this I borrowed, I stole, I love from Glennon Doyle. You can do hard things.
Right.
You can do hard things. We do hard things every day. That is just a fact of life. And we think we can't, or we don't want to. Sometimes we just don't want to do hard things.
But we also don't value when we do them.
Yeah. And then when we're afraid and we actually face our fears, and this is something that I actually, I'm open to learning always. And I learn from everyone. And so, who is wise? One who learns from all.
Right.
And so when I have the opportunity to learn, or when I learn from unsuspecting sources. I'm filled with awe. And so I bring that into the coaching space. And so my clients are also my teachers.
Right.
So maybe that's what it is. I think that everyone has a persona in their coaching space. And
I like that. I like that. And I think, using your powerful life lessons, being able to, show them the result, I think in itself, that role modeling, even if you're not saying it verbally, but somebody knows you're divorced and sees you living a life that is fulfilling and purposeful, I think that alone can be inspiring for people as well, and I think it leads me into a great question. I think in many divorces, they lose their voice. They scared to speak up. They intimidated, whatever you want to kind of call it or however you want to evaluate it. How do you help them to build the clarity and the confidence to speak up for themselves and shift into a more empowered mindset related to financial issues or any issues, really?
So in my divorce, that was me, right? I didn't have a voice.
Right.
I was afraid to ask questions. I thought I was supposed to know things that I didn't know. And so I didn't ask questions and I didn't push. And my lawyer said, well, I can do X, Y, and Z for you. And I said, okay. And they didn't ask me what I wanted. And so now I invite my clients to tell me what they think they want so they can tell their lawyers.
Right.
And so I tell them my own situation. So I share my vulnerability so they know that they're not alone. And so that's part. I wish I had a divorce coach when I was going through this, because maybe it wouldn't have taken 3 years. And those were
Right.
3 painful years when my children were really impressionable. And it was hard for the kids. And it remains hard for the kids. They're all well adjusted and sometimes not, right? But that's the story of everybody's life, right? And so everybody has different challenges. But, if they could have had different challenges than those that are related to the divorce, maybe I would have preferred that.
Right.
We all struggle. And I wish I could have given them something different during those years, but I was doing my best.
Right. Well, and I think you also bring another point is how you go through adversity, how you kind of go up against challenges and overcome them, or, do you fold? I think that role modeling in itself is a tremendous lesson for anyone watching, especially your children, because as you said earlier, and we discussed earlier, our narrative comes from our life, and it's the only narrative we know. It's the only, version we know to be able to gain the insights in what our life will be like or moving forward, or the story we're going to tell ourselves. So understanding that everybody's divorce is unique. It really is a personal experience. Even if you know other people who've got divorced, there's always differences in it. What advice, what thoughts would you share for somebody starting out the process, whether they're contemplating or kind of in the process? What advice would you give people?
So I would give people who are just thinking about it the advice to call a divorce coach. I think the first call should be to a coach before you even talk to a lawyer, because this way you can evaluate with support what you need to do. Is taking the steps toward divorce the right way for you to go? Or is there another path you can take? Right. And if it is the right way to go, then how do you want to present it, both to your spouse, to your kids? How prepared do you want to be? What are the questions you have for a lawyer? What are the things that you need? What are the things that you want? And how do you want the world to look afterwards for you and for your family? And so you can do that, lay out your strategy with a coach so that when you go into the process, you're prepared.
I like so much of that. I think, one of the things is people go in, they know they want to get divorced, but they really haven't thought about all these peripheral things that you just mentioned. And those are all the things, I always say to people, this is not the last chapter in this part of your life. It's the first chapter in the rest of your life. How do you want your life to look from this point forward, not looking back, closing it out, and being able to understand. And there's so many things in a divorce you may not have thought of that need to be addressed, and being the planning and the thought, the conscious and deliberate thought around that can make everything so much more impactful and more positive as you go through. So your dog just said hello. I've been watching. Hi. But with that, we do have to wrap up. Before we do, again, how can people get in touch with you to be able to walk through it? That's not a problem. I've had mine do that before too. So
say the question again.
Sorry, just how people can get in touch with you again.
Oh, of course. So people can reach me again, Lisa at lzlcoaching.com, or find my website, www.lzlcoaching.com. You can schedule a free 30-minute discovery session, and I can tell you what works for you and how we can work together. It all will work. And divorces are not the end, they're the beginning. My daughter just graduated Wisconsin. They call graduation commencement. It's the beginning. It's not the end.
Right.
But beginnings start with endings. So that's what divorce is about. And so I leave you with that.
No, I like that. And I appreciate you shedding light on, I think so many people, if they can't see it, touch it, sniff it kind of thing, it's not real. And having a mindset that you need to shift and create a whole new mindset, and it could be after 30 or 40 or 50 years or more of creating this mindset, having somebody to guide you, having somebody to walk that path with you, I think is so, so important. So thank you for sharing all these insights that we have. I am Hirsch Sermon, the host of the Financial Wellness Hour. Again, thank you for 3 great years. Please reach out to me through my website. That's lifecycle.financial, lifecycle.financial. Please reach out with questions for me or Lisa Lisser, who is my guest today. Thank you, Cece, again, for all that you have done. And I look forward to having you tune in for my next show in a couple weeks. Thank you so much. Be well.